Hey there, fellow gamers. Guess what? I've got 25 fantastic games that can run on low-end PCs with just 2 gigabytes of RAM or less and no graphics card required. Sounds too good to be true, right? Hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. It's not going to hurt you, I promise. Hey, you may want to check out my top 15 2D games. Some of them may run smoothly on low-end PCs. First up, we have Need for Speed Most Wanted. This classic racing game focuses on street racing, not just circuit events in the fictional Rock City. You play as a street racer, battling elite competitors to earn respect, money, and dominance. There's a classic version needing just 1 gigabyte of RAM, and an HD version that needs 2 gigabytes. For a game from 2005, it's aged like fine wine. Next up, we've got Postal 2. Ever wanted to live a week in the life of the Postal dude? Well, now you can. And the best part? You don't need a supercomputer to play it. The system requirements are practically ancient, a mere 128 megabytes of RAM. Yep, even your grandma's old PC can handle this one. Star Wars fans, dive into epic battles with Star Wars Battlefront 2004, only 1 gigabyte of RAM needed. May the Force be with your old PC. Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix lets you relive the 5th movie's adventures. With just 1 gigabyte of RAM and an onboard card, you can dive into this magical world. I've run it on my old notebook with no issues. Another legend, GTA Vice City, set in a fictional 1980s city, lets you build your criminal empire. With just 512 megabytes of RAM and a Pentium processor, you're good to go. No more excuses about your PC's capabilities. Following Vice City, let's talk about its predecessor, GTA 3. The first 3D game in the franchise revolutionized gaming. I played it a lot on my PlayStation 2, and it was amazing. With 1 gigabyte of RAM and a simple onboard card, you can enjoy it too. And don't forget about GTA San Andreas too. If you're into sports, FIFA 09 is still a fantastic choice. It was a hit on Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, and only needs 1 gigabyte of RAM and a Pentium 4 to run. For FPS fans, Bulletstorm is a must-play. After a crash landing on a hostile planet, you become an executioner, destroying everything in sight. Despite its detailed graphics, it runs on just 2 gigabytes of RAM and a Core 2 Duo processor. If retro-style games are your thing, Chrome is set in a world dominated by machines. With a Core 2 Duo processor and 2 gigabytes of RAM, you'll be blasting enemies in no time. Strategy lovers, Age of Empires 3 is your game. This real-time strategy classic runs on a Core 2 Duo processor and 2 gigabytes of RAM. Far Cry 1 takes you to a tropical paradise full of danger. Play as Jack Gary in Battle Mercenaries with just 256 megabytes of RAM and a Pentium 3. Brutal Legend is an action-adventure set in a heavy metal universe. With simple gameplay and lots of humor, it needs just 1 gigabyte of RAM and a Core 2 Duo processor. The Call of Duty World at War places you in World War II's chaos. This classic requires only 1 gigabyte of RAM and no dedicated graphics card. For horror fans, Resident Evil is an action-packed game with plenty of scares. Mount Blade Warband is a medieval RPG where you lead your own band of warriors. It runs with just 1 gigabyte of RAM and a Pentium 4. The final station is a platformer set in a dying world. Manage your train and passengers with just 1 gigabyte of RAM. Jet Set Radio lets you mark your territory with graffiti and escape the police on roller skates. It requires just 1 GB of RAM and a Pentium 4. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 is another gem. The skateboarding game needs only a Core 2 Duo processor and 2 GB of RAM. Total Overdose is a wild, open-world shooter set in Mexico. With just 1 GB of RAM, you'll be taking down drug lords in no time. Mini World is a free 3D sandbox game where you can build and explore with friends. It needs just 1 GB of RAM. Castle Crashers is a 2D arcade adventure with cooperative play. Gather your friends and rescue the princess with just 1 GB of RAM. Naruto Shippuden Ultimate Ninja Storm 3 lets you experience the 4th Ninja World War. With 2 GB of RAM and a Core 2 Duo processor, you're set for ninja battles. Remember guys, these requirements are pretty minimal. Subscribe to the channel to stay updated with new content, and leave a smart like if you enjoyed this video.